Okay, thank you. I appreciate you covering the class for me. I'm looking forward to visiting with my sisters. It's been a while.
Oh, it won't be fun. Now, where is this cabin?
It's in Prescott. It's Prescott. It's a camp.
Is that where you're from originally?
No.
Where are you from originally?
Buckeye. Buckeye.
Yeah.
That was where I was born. All my sisters and I were born in Buckeye. Well, we had to be born in Phoenix, but we lived in Buckeye. Yeah, my grandmother was from there.
You're all your family in there?
27.
Yeah, no. Now everybody's spread out. So yeah, so that's why we have a family gathering every year. Me and my sisters were all born in September. There's 4 of us, so we have a September, October celebration. It's usually too hot to be doing anything in September, so a lot of times we do October. But yeah, so we're going to meet in Prescott. So a lot of the families from California. We have some from Denver, Texas, all around. But we're going to meet in Prescott for a family camp. Yeah, 41 of us.
Wow.
41 of us.
That's cool.
Yeah, I have 3 sisters. So their kids and their kids' kids. We don't have any kids' yet. But we've got some grandkids, so it's going to be fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So, Camp Wamatichik. It's a camp we went to when my sisters and I were in Campfire Girls. We went there, and also it was a Bible camp what we went to when we were children, young adults, children. So, Camp Wamatichik. Anyway, it should be fun. Well, today we are in 2 Chronicles chapter 21, and I think we're going to get to Obadiah today. So we should. I think we'll go through Obadiah today. So we're in 2 Chronicles chapter 21. Remember that Jehoshaphat had done pretty good. That's who mainly was in charge, was the king at the time that we've been reading. So Jehoshaphat's been doing really good. Remember, he kept people focused on God. And a couple of times he made a mistake. Do you remember what his 2 big mistakes were? Do you remember what the source of his mistakes tended to be? Because he did pretty good about going around the kingdom, getting rid of the high places and the Asherah poles. Remember all that? He taught people he set up leadership so people were being taught the law of God. But do you remember where his 2 big failings were?
Chose bad friends, didn't he?
He did. He made alliances with people, and he didn't ask God before he did. He was pretty good about asking God about stuff before he did it, except when he would make alliances with people. And he made alliances with Ahab, and that ends up, we see the results of that in today's lesson. But he made these alliances, and then he talked to God. Remember with Ahab, he said, well, shouldn't we ask God whether we should go to battle? And Ahab called in his 400 prophets that said what he'd like to hear. And Jehoshaphat said, Jehoshaphat said, well, maybe we should, call in like someone from God, from Jehovah. And he said, Ahab said, well, he never tells me what I want to hear. So that was who he was making alliances with, were people like that. So we're going to see the results of that today. So we're in chapter 21, verse 1. Then Jehoshaphat rested with his ancestors and was buried with them in the city of David. And Jehoram, his son, succeeded him as king. Jehoram's brothers, the sons of Jehoshaphat, were Azariah, Jehiel, Zechariah, Azariah, Michael, and Shephatiah. All these were sons of Jehoshaphat, king of Israel. Their father had given them many gifts of silver and gold and articles of value, as well as fortified cities in Judah. But he had given the kingdom to Jehoram because he was his firstborn son. So if we look at our chart, you see Jehoram is where we are now after Jehoshaphat. He only rules for 8 years. And then Ahaziah rules for 1 year. And then we get a female, Athaliah, that rules for 7 years. So something's up here, because before we had Jehoshaphat for quite a while. So when it says that he had the 7 sons, that's showing how blessed he was. He had all these sons. So wasn't he a blessed? That's how God blessed him, was with 7 sons. And remember that he gave the sons the fortified cities in Judah to help protect the nation and keep the sons busy with their own reign so they didn't fight or compete with each other. So if you've got 7 sons, one of them's going to be the king, and you got to keep the others busy so they don't get jealous and try to fight with them. So we have cookies up here if anybody wants some cookies. So he sets them all up. They're all in their fortified cities, so everything's good, right? And then when Jehoram established himself firmly over his father's kingdom, he put all his brothers to the sword.
Oh, he killed them all?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Along with some of the officials of Israel.
Oh, that's bad.
He's got a really bad start.
So you're going to get punished right away?
It's going to be bad throughout what he does. Everything we see with him is going to be bad. Jehoram was 32 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 8 years. He followed the ways of the kings of Israel as the house of Ahab had done, for he married a daughter of Ahab. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Nevertheless, because of the covenant the Lord had made with David, the Lord was not willing to destroy the house of David. He had promised to maintain a lamp for him and his descendants forever. In other words, he's killed all of his brothers and the other officials in Israel. So now if God kills him, that's the last of the line of David. And so the Lord wants to keep the line of David. So he's going to have to work something out here with this evil guy. And the guy was evil. He was doing all the same stuff that had been happened with Ahab. Look at verse 6. He married a daughter of Ahab. Remember when that happened? We saw that when that happened. And that just bodes trouble right away because Ahab has a whole different way of governing a nation, and it's not a godly one. So this just cements the alliance between Ahab and Jeroboam, who's the son of Jehoshaphat. So it's like a political marriage. Verse 8, in the time of Jehoram, Edom rebelled against Judah and set up its own king. Now Edom is down over there on the bottom. We're going to show another map. Edom is down south of where our Judah is at. And does anybody remember where Edom was founded from? Do you remember anything about Edom? The name of Esau is from Esau. Do you remember who the brother was with Esau?
Jacob.
Good deal. Jacob and Esau, they were brothers who struggled in the womb. And Jacob put his hand out, but Esau came out first, right? Is that the right way to say it? So Jacob's name was wrestle Jacob, because he was usurping, putting his hand out, but actually Esau came out first. But Jacob tricked Esau into giving him his birthright. So Jacob is the one that followed in the line, and Esau, though, God gave Esau his own place, his own kingdom, Edom, and that was his own place. So he wasn't dishonored, or nothing bad happened to him. God took care of him too. So, but the thing is that the Edomites got kind of proud. That's what we're going to see here. It says, verse 9, so Jehoram went there with his officers and all his chariots. The Edomites surrounded him and his chariot commanders, but he rose up and broke through the night. To this day, Edom has been in rebellion against Judah. Now, when the children of Israel came up out of Egypt, they had to ask permission to go through Edom. Do you remember whether they were given permission to go through Edom? They weren't given permission. And so what did God tell them to do? Go around. He said, go around, right? So there's been respect for Edom as a country, but what's happened with Edom is they've gotten very proud, and now they've separated themselves from the other children of Israel, which would be Judah. That's the side they're on that south side. So this is a problem with Edom, is they're very proud, a very proud people. Verse 10b, Libnah revolted at the same time, because Jehoram had forsaken the Lord, the God of his ancestors. He had also built high places on the hills of Judah and had caused the people of Jerusalem to prostitute themselves and had led Judah astray. So is that good or bad, Libnah revolting? That they're revolting because Jehoram had forsaken the Lord? they're kind of being good guys. They're not linking themselves with them because of what's going on. But what's Libnah? I had to find a map. Okay, so see where Philistia is? Philistia is here, and Edom is here. So Judah's right in here. So Philistia is over on this side, and Edom's down here on the south. And Libnah is this town right here, right on the border between Philistia and Judah. And Edom's down here on the south. Okay? Notice this hilly country here that Edom is in, and it's right on the shore there of the bottom part of the Dead Sea. We're going to see a picture of that area. So Jehoram received a letter from Elijah the prophet. Well, let's go back here. Let's make sure we connect. Libnah revolted at the same time. So Libnah's revolting because Jehoram had forsaken the Lord. And he was building high places, and God caused the people of Jerusalem to prostitute themselves. So really, that sounds like a good thing that Libnah separated themselves from that, right? Verse 12. Jehoram received a letter from Elijah the prophet. Now, do you have anywhere in your Bible where you have a letter from Elijah? The book of Elijah? No? Elijah and Elisha were not written prophets. But Elijah did write a letter to this king. Now, where is Elijah living and serving? Do you remember? He's up in the northern Israel, wreaking all kinds of havoc with Ahab and the other ones that are up there, saying you're not following after God. Remember, he's having debates with the prophets up there, and we read all that history of him and stuff that he did in Kings. Chronicles doesn't do as much, doesn't give as much detail about Elijah and that happened, because Elijah and Elisha were warning the northern kingdom. The southern kingdom wasn't their main venue. But here we have a written letter that Elijah sent to the king in the southern kingdom. So let's see what he says. This is what the Lord, the God of the father David, says. You have not followed the ways of your father Jehoshaphat or of Asa, king of Judah, but you have followed the ways of the kings of Israel, and you have led Judah and the people of Jerusalem to prostitute themselves, just as the house of Ahab did. You have also murdered your own brothers, members of your own family, men who were better than you. So now the Lord is about to strike your people, your sons, your wives, and everything that is yours with a heavy blow. You yourself will be very ill with the lingering disease of the bowels. Remember we read about this? Until the disease causes your bowels to come out. Yikes. That's a very specific effect that's going to occur. So Elijah is warning him that this is going to be bad. And we don't know, Kings does not mention how Jehoram dies, but in Chronicles we find out it's this bowel disease that he has. So we find this out only here. Verse 16, the Lord aroused against Jehoram the hostility of the Philistines and of the Arabs who lived near the Cushites. They attacked Judah, invaded it, and carried off all the goods found in the king's palace, together with his sons and wives. Not a son was left to him except Ahaziah, the youngest. Okay, so this is against Jehoram, the hostility of the Philistines. So the Philistines are going to attack, and the Arabs who live near the Cushites. Okay, let's look at who that is. We had to get the bigger map because we're talking about, we saw the map before here of the Israelite area here, right? And we know the Philistine area is over here on this side. We just saw that. But in order to get the Cushites, you got to get down here into Egypt in that area. And often Ethiopia, the Sudan, that area would be where you would find Cush and the Cushites. And you might say, well, how come it's not the Egyptians? Why aren't the Egyptians attacking people? Why do we see people come from even further, like Cush, to come and attack? Well, there's good reason for that. The Egyptians believed that they had to mummify and save their body so that they could resurrect in their new life. That after they died, there's going to come a time when they would go into their eternal life, and they needed to have their body intact in order to do that. So if they went and fought in a war somewhere and their bones got separated and their body got dismembered or whatever, then they would not be able to go into eternity. That's why they do the mummification and all that stuff there at that time. They built the pyramids and stuff like that to hold them in until at the time of their going out. So a lot of times Egypt had other countries do their bidding. Ethiopia, Cush, those countries would come and do their bidding, and the Egyptians would support it. And sometimes they would send an army out a little ways, but they didn't go very far because they didn't want to get, unconnected with their bodies for the ever after. So it's kind of interesting how the Egyptians work into all of that. Verse 18, after all this, the Lord afflicted Jehoram with an incurable disease of the bowels. He told him, Elijah told him, in the course of time, at the end of the second year, his bowels came out because of the disease, and he died in great pain. His people made no funeral fire in his honor, as they had for his predecessors. Jehoram was 32 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 8 years. He passed away to no one's regret and was buried in the city of David, but not in the tomb of the kings. He led a very sad life, and he died a sad death, and the people did not honor him. He was evil like Ahab was. He brought the same things down with the evilness. So now we think this is the time of Obadiah. So good luck finding Obadiah in your scriptures. It's towards the end of the Old Testament. You'll probably want to look at the front contents page and find the page number, unless you have the little divots on the side that'll tell you. Find Obadiah. It's only one chapter long. There are only 9 books after it in the Old Testament, so it's towards the end. It's after Isaiah and Ezekiel, so you need to find the book of Obadiah. I'll give you a minute to find it. I think a page number might be the easiest way to get to Obadiah. It's only a 1-chapter book. There you go. Found it? All right. 1-chapter book. There you go. 1 page, maybe 2. Yeah, I had to look it up in the contents page. I couldn't find it by myself. I didn't have the tabs on the side of the one I was using. So, the author of the book of Obadiah is Obadiah. His audience, the people he's writing to, are the people of Judah who are suffering the treachery of the Edomites, so descendants of Esau. So Edom's causing some trouble, and so they're having conflict, and so that's the time that he's speaking to. The theme is that God, through Obadiah, announces his judgment against the Edomites. They're gloating over Jerusalem's devastation by foreign powers, like all this Cushites and all this problems that are going on. They're happy about that. They're cheering them on. They're being very antagonistic, and God is mad at them. And they're very cocky. The author's name is Obadiah, which means servant or worshiper of the Lord. His was a common name. Look at the list of where the same name is found just in the scriptures. And in other writings, of the time, that Obadiah was a super common name. It would be like saying Tom, Dick, and Harry. It's like, such a common name. Not Octavio. That would be an unusual name. Maybe like Jesus was common around here. Jose. Neither his father's name nor the place of his birth is given. We don't know that at all. The date and place of the composition are argued about. Some think that he wrote later, and others think that he wrote now during this time that there's the conflict with Edom. So the first one is the rebellion of Edom against Judah during the reign of Jehoram. That's the one that I think fits. That's why we're doing it right now. And in this case, Obadiah would be a contemporary of Elisha. That also makes sense because Elisha's working in the northern kingdom, and so he's working in the southern kingdom. And the second time that it could be that Obadiah could have been written would have been when the Babylonians attacked Jerusalem. Obadiah would then be a contemporary of Jeremiah. Now we do see parts of Obadiah quoted in Jeremiah. A lot of scholars think that pushes this to have been during this time we're reading about right now, because they feel that Jeremiah is quoting from Obadiah. There's certain sections that are exactly the same in Jeremiah. And others say, no, that's because they're contemporaries and they're giving prophecy at the same time. So we're not sure exactly the time frame that Obadiah was written, but it definitely fits with the context of where we are in Chronicles. It's the shortest book in the Old Testament. Woohoo! Its theme is that Edom is proud of their own security and they're gloating over Judah's devastation by foreign powers. However, Edom's participation in that disaster will bring on God's wrath. They will be destroyed. But Mount Zion and God's people will be delivered and God's kingdom will triumph. Edom's hostile activities have spanned the centuries of Israel and Judah's experience. The following biblical references help you to understand. Look at all the biblical references to Edom. That's because you have that tie with Esau, the close brothers, and they could have continued to live happy and peacefully in the land that God gave them and been very proud of their land, except that they began to actually become a part of the enemies of Judah and Israel. So that's where they made their mistake, to go against God, God's people. Since the Edomites are related to the Israelites, their hostility is all more reprehensible. Edom is fully responsible for their failure to assist them as well as for their open aggression against them. The fact that God rejected Esau in no way exonerates the Edomites. Edom, smug in its mountain strongholds, will be dislodged and sacked, but God's people will prosper because God is with them. That's the message. Okay, ready? Number 1. Obadiah chapter 1, verse 1. The vision of Obadiah. This is what the sovereign Lord says about Edom. We have heard a message from the Lord. An envoy was sent to the nations to say, rise, let us go against her for battle. See, I will make you small among the nations. You will be utterly despised. The pride of your heart has deceived you. You who live in the clefts of the rocks and make your home on the heights. You who say to yourself, who can bring me down to the ground? Though you soar like the eagle and make your nest among the stars, from there I will bring you down, declares the Lord. So Edom is proud to even be in fellowship with God. That's pretty proud. They're a very proud people, and they're doing things against God's people, God's chosen people, instead of being alongside them like a brother would be. This is a picture of them, the land they're at. This is the view of the mountains of Edom. It's southeast of the Dead Sea. So we looked on our other map. It's down there below the Dead Sea on the south side. And I showed you those hills. That's what the land looks like. And Obadiah prophesied the coming destruction of Edom. That's what we're reading here. In verse 2 it says, see, I will make you small among the nations. You will be utterly despised. Verse 3, the pride of your heart has deceived you. See where they are in the hills and stuff there? Very difficult to attack or to go after because they can be up in those hills on the high country. So they had kind of an advantage over anyone that would try to attack them. And they were saying they were cocky. They make their home among the heights. You say to yourself, who can bring me down to the ground? Because we're up here. We're in this special place. So, though you soar like the eagle, so it's just the idea that they are above everyone else and think that they're better than everyone else. And the problem is not so much just being cocky, but it's being so cocky that you are against God's people. That's the problem. God is doing a work in Judah, and you're against it and helping to attack it, helping to support attacking of it. That's where they crossed the line. They could have stayed proud in their land and done what they needed to do with God where they were at. But they were so proud they were attacking God's people. If thieves came to you, if robbers in the night, oh, what a disaster awaits you. Would they not steal only as much as they wanted? If grape pickers came to you, would they not leave a few grapes? but how Esau will be ransacked, his hidden treasure pillaged. All your allies will force you to the border. Your friends will deceive and overpower you. Those who eat your bread will set a trap for you, but you will not detect it. What's that mean that eat your bread will set a trap for you?
Friends like that, who needs enemies?
Yeah. It'd be like me saying, here, have some pumpkin bread, have some cookies, and then take a dagger and stick it in your back, right? That would be like you're enticing or being so friendly, and then you're attacking from behind. So that's what God is accusing them of, and they're attacking his people. In that day, declares the Lord, will I not destroy the wise men of Edom, those of understanding in the mountains of Esau? Your warriors, Teman, will be terrified, and everyone in Esau's mountains will be cut down in the slaughter. Because of the violence against your brother Jacob, you will be covered with shame. You will be destroyed forever. So this is a judgment that's coming down. Do we ever hear that term, in that day, in other prophecy? We hear it often from a prophet's words, and it's like saying there's going to come a day is going to come. And we hear it in terms of Revelation. In that day, there's going to come a day. Is it today? Is it 100 years from now? 200 years from now? It's a promise that there's going to be a day that this is going to come true. It may or may not be today. It may not be tomorrow. But if God promises it, it's going to happen. It may be at a time you least expect it. That term, in that day, is a common eschatological term. We hear it a lot in terms of Revelation. In that day, there's going to be a specific day when a certain prophecy happens. In that day, and it'd be the opposite of us saying, "Well, someday I'll get a job and go to work. Someday I'll get married and have a family. Someday." It's not that. When you say in that day, you're
Bad happen.
it could be good. The point is that it's a specific thing, not a dream, not a wisp, like maybe this will happen, maybe it won't. It's like saying, no, this isn't someday, this is in that day. There's going to come a time when you will be judged for this. Or it could be a good thing. In that day, when God returns to this earth, that kind of thing. It's specific. It's not like, well, maybe someday, whatever will happen.
It's in a time when you think it's prosperous, everything's going good, and what can happen, everything's going so good, but in that day, because it's not according to the Lord's will,
It's easy for us to get really cocky, isn't it?
when things are going good.
Yeah.
I think that it's because of us, not him. That's it.
And so this is saying there's a day is going to come when it will not be good. On the day you stood aloof while strangers carried off his wealth and foreigners entered his gates and cast lots for Jerusalem, you were like one of them. Now this is where some people say this has to do with later in time when Jerusalem is taken by Babylonia. That's why there's the argument, because of this verse here. Entered his gates and cast lots for Jerusalem, you were like one of them. But others say, no, he's talking about the takeover by Ahab's daughter. Later, Athaliah comes in, and it's like a grab at God's own people from the northern kingdom. So we don't know which one it is for sure. It applies in both situations. So the scholars argue about whether this was at this time or later when the Babylonians take Jerusalem, if that's the time he's talking about. Verse 12, you should not gloat over your brother in the day of his misfortune, nor rejoice over the people of Judah in the day of their destruction, nor boast so much in the day of their trouble. You should not march through the gates of my people in the day of their disaster, nor gloat over them in their calamity in the day of their disaster, nor seize their wealth in the day of their disaster. You should not wait at the crossroads to cut down their fugitives or hand over their survivors in the day of their trouble. So these were all the things they were doing that were against their own brothers and God's chosen people. The day of the Lord is near for all nations. As you have done, it will be done to you. Your deeds will return upon your own head. Have you heard that term before? The day of the Lord? We hear it in reference to Revelations. It's an eschatological kind of view. We hear it in Joel and various Ezekiel. Let's see, in verses 11 to 14, Ezekiel's denunciation of Edom reflects a similar punishment, fits the crime principle. In other words, you're going to get what you deserve. It's coming to you. And the day of the Lord, we often see that in reference to end times, that there's going to come a time when you're going to get just what you earned. It may not be today, but it'll come. Verse 16, just as you drank on my holy hill, so all the nations will drink continually. They will drink and be as if they had never been. But on Mount Zion will be deliverance. It will be holy, and Jacob will possess his inheritance. Jacob will be a fire, and Joseph a flame. Esau will be stubble, and they will set him on fire and destroy him. There will be no survivors from Esau. The Lord has spoken. Yeah. So look at this punishment by drink. They will drink and be as if they had never been. So all the nations will drink continually. They will drink and drink. It's a weird kind of statement, huh? But what are they drinking? Wrath and punishment and bad stuff. Bad things are going to happen to them continually until they're going to be completely destroyed. The kingdom of Edom will be gone, will be completely destroyed, because they have treated disrespectfully and so defiantly the chosen people, and actually tried to hurt them as much as they could. So they're not going to last. In verse 17, listen to this, but on Mount Zion will be deliverance. It will be holy, and Jacob will possess his inheritance. What is that about? That's weird. Don't you think that's a weird way to say it? On Mount Zion, what's Mount Zion refer to? Jerusalem. Will be deliverance. It will be holy, and Jacob will possess his inheritance. Why do they bring up Jacob? He hasn't been around for a long time. Jacob is a part of that line of David. So he's saying that that line of David is going to be preserved. God chose Jacob over Esau. God gave Esau his own land, which he called Edom, and he had his own place, but he decided instead to attack the inheritance that was Jacob's, that Davidic line. When he attacks Jerusalem, he's attacking that line that God had established. So he's going against God. Esau is setting himself against God, and he feels very proud like he can do it. Is it Esau himself? No, he's not alive anymore. It's Edom, which is the country, the land that was founded from Esau. People from the Negev will occupy the mountains of Esau, and people from the foothills will possess the land of the Philistines. They will occupy the fields of Ephraim and Samaria, and Benjamin will possess Gilead. This company of Israelite exiles who are in Canaan will possess the land as far as Zarephath. The exiles from Jerusalem who are in Sephar will possess the towns of the Negev. Deliverers will go up on Mount Zion to govern the mountains of Esau, and the kingdom will be the Lord's. So with Edom annihilated, other people are going to come in and occupy their place, their territories. And those remnants, we see them in Genesis, in Micah, and 3 different places in Genesis about how that land was given to Esau and the Edomites, but it's taken away from them because they did not, because they sought to be enemies of the chosen people, which would have been Jacob and the Davidic line. So they set themselves against God. Okay, so back to our chart. We had Jehoram, who did 8 years, and what happened to him? You know, Octavia, what happened to him? He died of a bowel death.
The one you were talking about? Also, that's why the disconnect.
Yeah, we're going back now to Second Chronicles because the Edom guys had been picking on the Israelites. So now we're going to go back to Second Chronicles and look at the king. We've got Jehoram and Ahaziah. Ahaziah is only going to be around for 1 year. So, and Athaliah is going to be 7 years. So we've got Jehoram was the king that died of the bowel disease, and he made everything back to evil. He followed the ways of King Ahab. So, so it's bad news for Jehoram. And now Ahaziah only rules a year. It says here in verse 1 of chapter 22, 2 Chronicles 22, verse 1. The people of Jerusalem made Ahaziah, Jehoram's youngest son, king in his place. Okay, so do you hear what they're doing? He died of his bowel death, and so the people made Ahaziah, because he was the youngest son, so he's still in the line of David, king in his place, since the raiders who came with the Arabs into the camp had killed all the older sons. Remember, the mother had them killed. So Ahaziah, son of Jehoram, king of Judah, began to reign. Ahaziah was 22 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 1 year. His mother's name was Athaliah, a granddaughter of Omri. What do you remember about the granddaughter of Omri? That's the relative of Ahab. So she was a relative to Ahab, and remember Jehoshaphat went up north and married one of the women there, and that was Athaliah. So Athaliah now comes forward now in this 1 year reign of this boy, of the youngest son. So we're seeing Athaliah's name mentioned now, but she's not yet queen. Verse 3, he too followed the ways of the house of Ahab, for his mother, Athaliah, encouraged him to act wickedly. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, as the house of Ahab had done, for after his father's death they became his advisors to his undoing. He also followed their counsel when he went with Joram, son of Ahab, king of Israel, to wage war against Hazael, king of Aram, at Ramoth Gilead. The Arameans wounded Joram, so he returned to Jezreel to recover from the wounds they had inflicted on him at Ramoth in his battle with Hazael, king of Aram. Then Ahaziah, son of Jehoram, king of Judah, went down to Jezreel to see Joram, son of Ahab, because he had been wounded. So we're seeing here this big influence from the northern kingdom to the southern kingdom, and they're doing things in the southern kingdom that have been being done in the north, and that does not make God happy. That's the whole point, that they've completely pulled apart what Jehoshaphat had established in the kingdom. It's a mess now. Through Ahaziah's visit to Joram, God brought about Ahaziah's downfall. How long was Ahaziah in power? 1 year. In 1 year, when Ahaziah arrived, he went out with Joram to meet Jehu, son of Nimshi, whom the Lord had anointed to destroy the house of Ahab. While Jehu was executing judgment on the house of Ahab, he found the officials of Judah and the sons of Ahaziah's relatives who had been attending Ahaziah, and he killed them. He then went in search of Ahaziah, and his men captured him while he was hiding in Samaria. He was brought to Jehu and put to death. They buried him, for they said, he was a son of Jehoshaphat, who sought the Lord with all his heart. So there was no one in the house of Ahaziah powerful enough to retain the kingdom. So basically, this is a coup. This is where the lady, what's her name, Athaliah, has been working to get everyone killed that was a part of that line. She's trying to take over. She's a woman, but she's the only one left of the in that line, and she was married into that line, so she's not actually in the line of David because she married one. So her scheme now is to try to get them all done for. If we look here, you can see here she is, Athaliah. She's going to reign for 7 years. Ahaziah was only 1 year. Verse 10, when Athaliah, the mother of Hazael, saw that her son was dead, she proceeded to destroy the whole royal family of the house of Judah. In other words, her son was the one that was Ahaziah. He was supposed to be the king. He'd only been king a year. And when she saw that her son was dead, she decided to get rid of anybody else who then would be of the line of David to come into king. Now that puts her directly opposite of God. God's got to intervene here because he made that promise that there was always going to be someone from the line of David on the throne. Verse 11. But Jehosheba, the daughter of King Joram, took Joash, son of Ahaziah, and stole him away from among the royal princes who were about to be murdered, and put him and his nurse in a bedroom. Because Jehosheba, the daughter of King Jehoram and wife of the priest Jehoiada, was Ahaziah's sister, she hid the child from Athaliah so that she could not kill him. He remained hidden with them at the temple of God for 6 years, while Athaliah ruled the land. Then look at our chart. We see that she hid Joash, right? Who's next? Who comes after Athaliah? Joash for 40 years. Joash turns out to be a good king, one of the good ones, and he reigns for 40 years. But Athaliah's craft, what she tried to do was to get all of them dead so that there was no one from the royal line to take the kingship. That was her goal. But because they hid Joash, now when we read in Kings, that story was like 3 chapters long about how they hid him and who took care of him and how he was raised and all of that. This is kind of making it briefer. And so it's a little bit confusing with the names. But basically, you can keep track of the people. Ahaziah was only 1 year. He's the one with the bowel problem. Athaliah was the woman who took over and then tried to kill everyone in the Davidic line. And then Joash is the one that was hidden, that she didn't know about was hidden. And we're going to read in the next sections in Chronicles, we'll read about Joash's rise, that he's coming up again to power. So what's the lesson here? Can we learn anything from the Edomites?
Like we talked about Jehoram, Ahaziah, and he was pretty much shambles, right? And then we also went to Obadiah, which talks about Edom, and that even their pride, have a lot of pride. But then my mind wandered, and I failed to click those.
So the key is that Obadiah wrote that about warning the Edomites to not join in this picking on the southern kingdom.
Edom started rebelling, and the other kingdom also started rebelling.
Cushites and the Philistia, these other kingdoms were coming together, and they were joining in the attack because you've got all this disruption occurring in the southern kingdom. It makes it very attractive to come in and begin looting those towns and trying to come into the land while it's disruptive. And Edom especially God was especially angry with them because they were a part of the genealogy. That Esau was a part of the family line, not of the line of David, but he was still a part of the Israelites from Abraham. The promise had been given to Abraham. And Esau was not the one that was chosen between Esau and Jacob. Jacob was the one that the line continued on. But Esau was not punished. He was given his own place. And even when the children of Israel needed to come through and walk through, they were allowed to say no. That was no big deal. But when they started trying to help things be disrupted in Judah, trying to make problems, encouraging that stuff that was going on, that's when God spoke against Edom and said, you think you're so safe where you are, I can get to you. And he does. We'll read later on their fall. Pride comes before the fall, right? Mm-hmm. So what do we learn from this passage for ourselves? Should
drain the swamp that
What?
Ahab left, and then Athaliah kills the rest of the people. I mean, because she wants to take over.
So what I'm thinking, the lesson for me is to not be happy at another person's misery. Even though they created it, even though they made it happen for themselves, even though it was obvious you shouldn't have done this or that, right? I think sometimes we look at other people's lives and we're critical or we're hateful. And that's what the Edomites were doing. They were very proud of their setup. Oh, and look what's happening over there to, Jacob and his ancestors. Look at the way it's going for them.
They deserve it.
They deserve it. Yeah, in fact, let's get with the Philistines and let's kind of get that southern part to take advantage of that, right? They even were trying to take advantage of it. I think that's a lesson to us to not be looking down our nose at other people who are struggling in their walk, in their Christian walk or in their faith. We should don't be like Edom, because God will make sure that you have a humbling experience. He will grow us in humility.
Been there, done that.
Yeah, haven't we all been very foolish where we act like we know it all, or we think that we've got it going, and we look down at others with critical eye. What should be our stance? You see them making mistakes, they're wrong. What should be our stance?
We should be going along beside them, helping them to show the way they should be going, not to be critical of where they're going, but to gently with love and show
That would
them.
be ideal, right?
Mhm.
Let's say that they're really ornery and they reject and refuse and say, yeah, you just, what if they reject your help? Then what?
Right.
They're in God's hands. And sometimes people experience the consequences of being in God's hands in a negative way. God wants to love us and teach us. But if you can't help them, if you can't encourage them, if they refuse you, then all you can do is leave it in God's hands. He may have a very hard lesson for them. And they may not learn the lesson that God has for them to learn. But it's God's work. We're just lucky when we get to be a part of it. It's God's work He's doing in our lives and in other people's lives. And this went down, if Jehoshaphat, he had been there for quite a while and done pretty good for was it 40 years? I can't remember what our chart said. 25 years? He had done quite a bit in his years. And we're coming now to Joash, who was there 40 years. He's another good guy. So a lot of terrible stuff can happen in just a few years. Between Jehoram, Ahaziah, and Athaliah, there's a time of some really bad leadership. But Joash turns out to be pretty good until the end. At the end, he kind of goes astray, but he starts out pretty good. So remember, pride comes before the fall. That's the message of Obadiah. Pride's not good for you.
Name these. Pride in Ahaziah, Edom.
Athaliah?
Athaliah, that's when Edom kind of. Where is that stated?
Yeah, that's what they think, that
Oh, there.
Obadiah was talking to Edom because they were attacking. Remember when it said that the Cushites were attacking and their Libnah and those different things? Those would have all been connected with Edom. And so that's what they're saying, that Edom was attacking from the base. So scholars argue about whether Obadiah was written at this time, or it might have been written later when Jerusalem is taken from, when Babylonians come and take Jerusalem. So they don't really know for sure the timing because there were lots of Obadiahs. The name was so common, and they can't tell, when this was actually written. It was either at this time when they were being attacked from all sides and having the struggle within, or it might have been later when the Babylonians take Jerusalem. Could be at that time. So. Okay.
We
Hope.
see the Arabs celebrating even in our day. I mean, at the Holocaust, they were happy and celebrating and giving gifts, same way as 9/11. We saw the Arabs, so they still have not changed much as far as gloating when there's devastation on the other side. We see that in our own day. I mean, not too long ago, they were celebrating, handing out gifts to each other, celebrating something.
And I think it's good when we see examples of that and name it so we recognize it. But my biggest concern is I not be one of those people. That I not rejoice at the punishment of someone else. I'm sorry, I want to be sorry that they had to endure that. And do what I can, if it's some individual, do what I can to help them make better decisions, right? Try to do what we can, but a lot of times they'll refuse. When people are stubbornly going their own way, they refuse to have any suggestion.
Thank our God, please.
Have any of you had a wayward son or daughter who didn't do things the way that you wished they had? Same kind of feeling. They're going to make their choices and they're going to feel the repercussions of those choices, and in some cases they're going to be sad things, because, and it's hard to watch, but we shouldn't watch with a gloating. We should watch with sympathy and with prayer and looking for any way that we can encourage them to do differently. But sometimes they just refuse, and God's going to bring punishment. Sometimes he brings punishment. But let's not gloat. Even if they're getting what they deserve. I'm thankful every day that I don't get what I deserve. I get grace. I want grace. Let's pray. Father, I pray that we might be gentle, kind people who love one another. I pray, Lord, that we will not be prideful and that we will not look on others who are experiencing difficult times because of their own choices. And I pray that we don't look down on them, that we not like the Edomites who are proud, but that we will be humble and thankful that we haven't gone that path. We will seek some way to help the individual or the situation if there's any way that we can be of help. And we will at the very least pray and try to encourage them to do what is good.